Why, hello guys! In today's Math Minute video, we're going to be following up on our last video where we started learning about how to add and subtract with mixed numbers and fractions. Now, this video is part 2 because this skill can get more complicated. And one of the reasons it can get more complicated is that sometimes you're going to end up needing to regroup or simplify your answer. So that's what we're going to explore in today's video. Like last time, we're always going to start with finding a common denominator whenever we're adding and subtracting with mixed numbers. And sometimes when you are adding fractions and mixed numbers together, you're going to end up making a new whole, which is what is going to necessitate that regrouping. And finally, sometimes you might have to simplify your answer. So you might get a fraction and you might need to find an equivalent fraction by simplifying it to its lowest term. Let's take a look at this. So our first problem, what we're going to do is we are going to build a fraction that we are adding together that has unlike denominators. So for this example, we're going to add 1½ plus 2 2/3. Notice that these pieces are not the same size, and kind of like what we talked about in the last video, if you're trying to add pieces together and they're not the same size, that makes it very difficult to figure out how much you have. So what we're doing is we're going to look at these denominators, 3 and 2, and we're going to think about what multiple we could get to skip counting by both of these numbers. Now, if you get stuck, you could always multiply the two denominators together. And in this case, actually, by multiplying them together, we are going to find our least common multiple, which in this problem is 6. Now, notice how I showed my little insults, whatever I'm doing to the top, I'm doing to the bottom. And I always call those insults because I tell students it's like I'm insulting your intelligence by making you write that down. But writing that little piece down is going to help you not make a silly mistake. So even though it might seem like extra work, it's really important to show all those steps so that your eyes don't get tricked. It's really easy to make a mistake on these types of problems. And so what I've done is I have now shown that indeed 1/2 is equal to 3/6, and that 2/3 is indeed equal to 4 of these 6. And now that our 6 are the same size pieces, we are able to join them together. And so I'm going to just move these guys together, and so we can see what we're doing when we're adding that fraction. And as you can see, the reason why this problem is a little more interesting than the problems that we did last time is that when we add our fractional leftovers together, we're going to end up with an amount that's greater than 1. In fact, we have 7 of those 6. And as you can see, the numerator is greater than the denominator, and we call that an improper fraction. Joining those wholes together is pretty doable. 2 plus 1 is 3. Done and done. Now that is the final answer, 3 and 7, 6. But why would we never see this in a cookbook or in a recipe book? Because we have more than one whole with that little improper fraction. In fact, the very definition of an improper fraction, it is an amount greater than 1. So technically, we have 4 wholes and 1/6 left over. That is an equivalent amount to 3 and 6. It's equivalent. It's just in simplest form. So 4 and 1/6 is going to be our final answer. Some of you might be thinking, oh no, I forgot how to turn an improper fraction into a mixed number, and that is fine. That is something that happens to everybody. So I'm going to just make a very basic improper fraction. How I know it's improper is that the numerator is greater than the denominator. I know it takes 3/3 to make one whole. So if I have 5 of those thirds, I know that it is bigger than 1. Now see that little stick right there? Some kids think that's just a stick in the air, but it's actually a division bar. So to solve for this improper fraction, to convert it into a mixed number, we can simply do the division statement, 5 divided by 3. When we get those two leftovers, we can rise them up. Remember, the size of our piece does not change, so we're still working with thirds. And so according to our division, 5/3 is equal to 1 2/3. Let's put these chips together and see if it actually matches. Oops, it's a little tougher than I thought. There we go. 1 whole and 2/3 left over, and that is equal to 5/3. Now here's the deal. In a cookbook or something, you will never see 5/3, even though it's an equivalent amount to 1 2/3. The mixed number is the proper, the more popular, the more usable thing that you will see out in the world. However, when you're adding and subtracting with fractions, sometimes using that conversion and making an improper fraction can actually help you solve. Sometimes you might actually have to solve or simplify a problem by getting the fraction piece in its simplest form. So as you look here at this little mixed number that we've created, this mixed number is 1 whole and 1, 2, 3, 4 twelfths. That's a beautiful fraction. However, it can be simplified. 4 and 12 have common factors. This is why we're always harassing you about practicing those math facts. Some of you noticed right away what the greatest common factor is of these two numbers, but some of you might have to do a factor rainbow or find the factors of the number in order to see which factors these numbers have in common. They've got 1, 2, and 4 in common, and 4 is the greatest, the biggest factor that they have in common. And so if we divide the top number and the bottom number both by 4, remember we always have to use the same number when we're dividing or multiplying those fractional pieces. So if we divide these both by 4, we should be able to get this exact amount, but in simpler form. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to divide my top number by 4, and my bottom number also by 4. And when I do that, I should be left with this fraction in simplest form. So 4 divided by 4 is going to give me 1. And 12 divided by 4 is going to give me 3. Notice whatever I did at the top, I did to the bottom, and I wrote that piece down. Now let's see if it actually matches. Yep, look, 1/3 is exactly equivalent to 4 twelfths. And so you can see when I start to try to move these little 12s over, why we call it simplest form. It's actually much more simple for me to grab one of these thirds than it is for me to grab 4 of these 12s. And so simplifying your answer will also make your computation a lot less intensive. And I know that that always makes everybody happy. So you made it. You made it to the end of this little lesson, and this skill can be a little tough. So as we wrap up this video, just know that this one takes some practice. And if it feels a little uncomfortable at first, that's totally normal. Remember, you're always going to start with a common denominator. So if you start there, you're off to a great start. And then the point that we brought up this week, which was a little bit different than when we first went into this topic, is that sometimes you're going to end up needing to simplify your answer by either converting an improper fraction to a mixed number, or sometimes you might have a fraction that you need to simplify to simplest form by looking for common factors in the numerator and the denominator. Knowing your math facts is so helpful for this. So again, just know the fractions are actually pretty fun. They are a little tough sometimes, but you can do it. And remember that you are welcome to look back on this video as many times as you'd like to refresh this skill.